The stock of the day is brought to you by IG, Australia's #1 CFD provider. With over 17,000 markets and extended trading hours, turn US earnings season volatility into opportunity. Get started at IG.com.
Stock of the day is the biggest of them all. Commonwealth Bank has provided a quarterly update reporting an unaudited cash profit of $2.6 billion for the third quarter. That is flat on the average of the last two quarters, but up 6% from a year earlier. Loan impairment expenses for the quarter coming in at $223 million. The lender posting a 1% increase in operating income, driven by lending growth and higher trading income. It says its balance sheet remains strong and it's aware that it's currently a challenging period for Australian households and businesses. And in fact, we have received a viewer comment just before it reported saying, here you go, Henry, this one's for you. Now, is this just a matter of convincing your fellow panelists to also recommend a buy? However, based on the last 12 months, there are not many that have the same conviction as you. Good luck, he says ominously. John. And of course, you look at any of the brokers, and this is just way overboard. So, what do you think, Henry?
Andrew, I had a bit of a rant on the investment committee because we never, ever get banks suggested on the call, and we never get a double buy on a bank, so we never get the chance to consider it. So from the outset, I will say, having put it out there that we need some banks to look at, this is a buy because I want to get it in the mix and talked about on the investment committee.
Well, you're going to have to convince your fellow panelists, though, aren't you? But anyway, we'll get to that.
I have sent him money. Having said all of that, saying it's a buy, these kind of prices, it is nosebleed territory and it is very expensive. So when I say a buy, I'd like to get it on the committee sort of horizon with a very tiny weighting. It's 11.5% of the index, a very tiny weighting. But then at least if it drops to 140 again, we've got the chance to add to that weighting. So there's kind of some method in my madness. If you're looking at this, fresh, and you're not taking into account the investment committee, then this is probably, the result was a pretty good result, let's face it. The new battleground clearly is business lending, and we saw that with Judo 3 or 4 weeks ago, I guess, when they had a big fall. And we've seen it with other banks now competing quite aggressively again in business lending. CBA doing very well there. Very good bank. I mean, they run it particularly well. Matt Common's done a great job.
Well, they do it better than anyone else, don't they?
So they say. And it is, I also talked about this a few weeks ago in terms of like CommBank is a bit like Domino's used to be in terms of, Don Mage tried to persuade us for a long time, and he did it for a long time, that it was a technology stock and it wasn't a pizza shop, it was a technology stock. And CBA has done a very good job in persuading us that their technology is better than anybody else's. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But certainly you're paying a big price for that. Up here, if it wasn't for the investment committee thing, it's a hold. I prefer NABs at the moment, I think, on a relative basis. If you were doing a pairs trade, I would be trimming CBA and buying NABs. But let's face it, there's a whole army of shareholders out there, CommBank shareholders. I did a thing for the ASA recently, and I said to a group of 150 people, put your hands up if you own CommBank, and 150 hands went up.
Yeah, of course.
And I said, put your hands up if you want to sell any Commonwealth Bank. I think 3 hands went up.
Right.
And that's the problem. No one wants to sell it because they've held it since $5, $10. The dividend's great. The profit keeps coming in every year. You crank the handle, the money churns out. Same with the rest of the banks. So here it's a hold, but for purely strategic reasons, I'm going to have it as a buy so that it gets on our list. Hopefully, if Andrew kind of agrees, and he probably won't, but at least it gets on our list, and then we can have it with a tiny weighting, but at least discuss it every month, whether we would or we wouldn't increase the weighting. That's my logic.
Let's see if Henry's strategy plays out then. So, Andrew, bribes aside, what do you think?
Well, and just to be clear, Henry hasn't tried to bribe me with money. He's tried to persuade me with Lego. So when we catch up in June, Henry, I'll be certainly looking to collect if I choose to go down that path. But no, seriously, it's a really interesting academic question that Henry's putting forward, because on purely the numbers basis, it's hard to justify buying CBA on these valuations. But and I'm certainly happy to own it, and there are plenty of others out there as well that have either been here on the call or out in the broader universe have been wrong on this for the last 18 months. Completely wrong. So I'm happy to support Henry's view that it's a buy,
Yes.
and I'm happy to let it go to the broader investment committee and teasing out, because Henry's right, like it's 11% of the index. And we've all been wrong. And ultimately, as with all companies, read about it at 4:10 in the afternoon. The market is always right, and the market's had this right. Now, whether the market's right on the valuation basis and to everything Henry was talking about, technology and all that type of thing, that's a whole other story. Ultimately, the thing is going up. The results weren't too bad, as Andrew was just talking about before. So why don't we have a conversation around whether it should be part? And because even just from a committee point of view, of which I'm not a member, but, like banks make up 25% of the index. And if there's not even a commentary around having a bank in there, isn't the index potentially on the back foot to begin with? So no, I'm happy to support it as a buy.
Henry, it's paid off, and but I should note that comes with an asterisk.
It does come with an asterisk, I have to say, asterisk the gall. It does come with an asterisk, and it is a strategic thing. Now, if I was putting it in the investment committee thing at this high price, I'd put it on a very, very low percentage weighting, 0.5 or 1%, but it's 11.5% of the market.
Yep.
And it's hard to outperform if you don't have any banks, and this is the first one that's come up. If it was NABs, I'd probably put a buy on it, regardless of the hold kind of thing. So it does have an asterisk.
All right, well, there you go. It is now in play. Let's see how it does play out when the committee next meets at the beginning of June. That is our stock of the day, CBA.
The stock of the day was brought to you by IG. Turn volatility into opportunity this US earnings season with extended trading hours on over 110 key US shares. Get started at IG.com.